Welcome to our channel, where we explore the unknown and the eerie. Today, we bring you a story that will chill you to the bone. It's a story about an old man called Benny Lee, who was falsely accused of killing a child and was brutally tortured and hung from a tree. This is a story titled The Ghost of Injustice, a horror script that will keep you on the edge of your seat. So sit back, relax, and be prepared to be scared. The small town of Millfield was a quiet and peaceful place, but there was one house on the outskirts that everyone avoided. It was the old, dilapidated home of Benny Lee, an old man who had been dead for 40 years. Benny had been falsely accused of killing a child and was brutally tortured and hung from a tree. The house had been empty ever since, but the rumors about Benny and his supposed crimes never faded away. They say that he returns to snatch children from the neighborhood every now and then, and they'd never return. The house stood across the street from Sampson Middle School, and the students would often look out the window and whisper about the ghost of Benny Lee. Kids knew him as B. Lee and made a song about him. If you go past B. Lee house, you best run fast and don't be last. You never know when it could be your end. B. Lee sits in the trees or waits in the den. Don't stop now, I hear him coming again. The story of B. Lee was passed down from generation to generation, and the kids of the school would dare each other to go inside the old house. But no one ever dared to enter the house, not even the bravest of the kids. They all knew that the ghost of Benny Lee was still inside, smiling evilishly, waiting for his next victim. It was a cold, dark night, and the school was closed. But one of the students, a young boy named Tim, was dared by his friends to go inside the old house. Tim had always been curious about the house, and he wanted to prove to his friends that he was not scared. As he approached the house, he could feel the cold wind blowing through the windows, and the door creaked as he opened it. Inside, the house was dark and musty, and it smelled of death, with giant rats running around. Tim tried to turn on the lights, but they wouldn't work. He felt like someone was watching him. He heard footsteps coming from upstairs, and he knew it was Benny Lee. The ghost of Benny Lee had come back to claim his next victim. Tim ran out of the house as fast as he could, but he could still hear the ghostly footsteps following him. He could feel the cold breath of Benny Lee on the back of his neck, and he knew he had to get away. Tim ran all the way back to his house, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. He was too scared to tell his parents what had happened, so he kept it to himself. But the next day, when he went back to school, he couldn't focus on anything. His mind was consumed with thoughts of Benny Lee and the ghostly footsteps. The next day, a young girl from the school named Jenny went missing. She was last seen by her teachers, walking home after her classes, and no one knew what had happened to her. The town was in a state of panic, and the police searched everywhere for her, but she was nowhere to be found. Tim couldn't believe his ears when he heard the news that Jenny, one of his best friends, had gone missing. Tim knew what had happened. He knew that Jenny was taken by the ghost of Benny Lee. He knew that the old man was still out there, waiting for his next victim. Jenny was last remembered playing with her friends at the community center close to Benny Lee's old house when she vanished without a trace. Tim knew that he had to find her, no matter what. As he walked across the street towards the haunted house, he couldn't shake off the eerie feeling that had settled in the pit of his stomach. Tim pushed the thought out of his mind and entered the old house. "Old man Benny, not today, not today," Tim said. As he searched the ground floor, he found no clues of Jenny, only the dried-up thick snakeskin hanging around and broken bottles' empty can. So as he made his way upstairs, he was reminded of the stories about how Benny Lee was tortured and hung for crimes he never did. In the whistling in the wind that blew through the many cracks of the crumbling house, he could almost hear the cries of mercy as Benny screamed his innocence. The door to the attic was locked, but his imaginary scream suddenly turns real as he hears yells for help on the other side of the door. Tim knew that he had to find a way inside, and he was determined to get Jenny safely out. This should be easy. With a sense of determination, Tim began to search for a way to open the door. Just what I needed. Looking over some rats wrestling in the corner over dead bugs, Tim found a rusty hammer hidden behind some old boxes and used it to pry open the door. As he pushed it open, he was hit by a wave of musty air. The attic was dark and filled with cobwebs, but he could see a faint light coming from the other side. Tim made his way through the attic, dodging fallen beams while avoiding broken floorboards. As he got closer to the light, he realized that it was coming from a small dark room at the end of the attic. He pushed open the door and found a young girl covered in webs. She was Jenny, tied to a chair, shivering with fear. Tim was relieved to have found his friend, but he knew that they had to get out of the attic before something bad happened to them. As they made their way out of the attic, Tim could feel the ghost of Benny Lee watching them, and he knew that they had to be careful. As they made their way out of the haunted house, Tim and Jenny were greeted by the relieved faces of their friends and family and the authorities. Tim knew that he had saved Jenny, but he also knew that the ghost of Benny Lee was still out there, angry, watching and waiting. He knew that he couldn't let his guard down. After gaining full consciousness, Jenny told the police that she was walking home from school when she felt a cold hand grab her from behind. She was dragged into the old house, and she saw the ghost of Benny Lee. She was terrified and then blacked out. As the days passed, Tim's obsession with B. Lee grew right after Jenny told him about her scary conversation with B. Lee. He couldn't stop thinking about the old man and the injustice that had been done to him. He started to research Benny's case, but failed to discover the mistake in the investigation. No one knows for sure what happened to Benny Lee or why he was wrongfully accused of killing a child, but his spirit continues to linger in the town, a reminder of what happens when justice is not served. His story serves as a cautionary tale for all who would seek to ignore injustice and instead do the right thing. Tim and his friends couldn't shake off the eerie feeling that lingered in the air. One night, as they were closing the old house, they heard strange noises from upstairs. They went to investigate, and they found nothing out of the ordinary. But as they were leaving, they saw a figure standing in the cracked window, watching them. It was the ghost of Benny Lee, and he was smiling. They knew that they had to be careful when they walked by the old house, as they never knew when Benny Lee's ghost might make an appearance. Alright, guys, this wraps up our video for today. If you found this video useful and interesting, please check out the true story of the Taco Bell Strangler video, and please don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well to Top Drawer Tales.